or there's this picture been put out that unionized workers have it all. We've great pensions, we've got great benefits, we've got great jobs. Thank goodness we have great jobs, great benefits, and great pensions, because if we have them, you can have them. If they get taken away from us, it is the dramatic race to the bottom. And so I think we have to get past that idea that we have to be sort of quiet about being in the union and quiet about why we're successful, because that kind of information and that notion can bring in other people, and then everyone can benefit.
Nancy, I want to pick up on that, because I think it's a critical point, and that script has been out there. Oh, look at these union workers, they have it cushy, or they had particularly the attack on pensions, and we'll leave aside the fact that workers actually pay for their own pensions and put their own money in, which is invested, and that all of that it's bargained for and it's a deal. But there somehow the argument has become that guy has a pension and I don't, and I work just as hard, but for whatever reason the response hasn't been I want one too. The response has been take his or her pension away. And that, to me, I admit, boggles me a little bit. I don't understand why that's the response out there. But maybe as we go around, how does the labor movement more generally get out there and change that script so that people don't see the labor movement as, having a pension and taking away from me, but as helping all of us? I mean, we all know, and in fact even Jim Flaherty was on board, the simplest fix out there is to expand the CPP from 25% replacement to 50%. It's easy, it's easily done, and it's not a particularly radical idea when you have someone like Jim Flaherty, a conservative finance minister, saying this makes sense. Stephen Harper killed that, and there doesn't seem to be an outcry. How do we as the labor movement change the script out there and make people realize this is for everyone? This isn't for a few people. We want a couple of pensions. We don't want seniors living in poverty. We want to have workable pensions. How do we do that?
Well, I'm going to say it again. I've had more pension committee with my members. We go out and, the social media, we have newsletters, we have, our websites, we have all kinds of different tools that we communicate with our members. But now, lo and behold, this is why we're doing our social media, where it's out there, the public sees it. What is our union doing? What is your union doing? When we come together to say, unions are fighting for fair collective agreements, for strong collective agreements with our health and safety rights and on. But when we're talking pension, when are you going to retire, Joel? When are you going to retire, Jenny?
Yeah.
Nancy? Can we afford? I'm a 10-month, 2-week employee. I've been with the Toronto District School Board for 27 years. I mean, by the time I retire, I could be 70 years old before I could afford my pension, because it takes so long to get that credited service and your full service. And again, people, when we have to pension, we could talk pension, your eyes would be glazed over. But we have to think about, now when we think about our seniors, how many seniors do you see are still working? How many of our pensioners are still working? Why is that?
I think pensions are probably the most important thing to talk about today, not only just, in the labor movement, but workers' capital is their pension plan. And earlier I said to folks, you actually have to talk about, you have to apply some pressure and talk about what you don't have. Why don't I have a pension plan? Not I should lose my pension plan. People should start asking that question, demanding an answer. Why in the world is the Canada Pension Plan not been increased in 25 years? That's ridiculous. My goodness. The cost of living is increasing. Everything is more expensive. It's just, I can't even understand why the government hasn't turned their mind to giving everyone a pension. And they could. And, some of the defined benefits plans are really, really expensive. Are they? Well, I have a defined benefits plan, and I've paid for most of mine. I mean, it's my money. The difference is the investment and whether or not they can touch your money. In a defined contribution plan, they can play with your money. And that's what the government wants. They want to be able to play with workers' money. People ought not to buy into that notion. CPP should be there for every single person. It should be increased. The government is making a huge mistake. This is a no-brainer. And how you get it is by collecting a little bit of tax money from people who have been and are making $14 billion profits every year. They need to hand over a little bit of money that goes into the government coffers. It's called tax fairness, I think. It needs to go into the government coffers, and the government needs to then start spending that money on its people.
And I want to pick up on the CPP because you raised it, Nancy, and I think it's critically important. There's a myth out there that government's inefficient, big government programs don't work. I want to point out that your RRSP has a management fee of at least 2.5%. Go home, check it, pull it up, at least 2.5%. The CPP is less than 1% in management, usually around 0.75%. And that may sound like a small difference. But for me, and Colleen asked the question, when's my retirement? About 30 years from now, hopefully, if everything goes well. Over 30 years, that can make $100,000 to $200,000 of difference, that 1.5%. And that's money that either goes to a bank or goes to me. And so, when people try to say government's inefficient, government can't do it, the fact of the matter is the CPP actually is a fabulous model and is proof that collective work, collective action does work. We can work together for something better. So I just want to throw that out there. And Jenny, I cut you off, but I think it's important that people look at those kinds of numbers because the CPP works and it returns money to you. So the question is, why is the government so intent on not expanding it?
And just to continue on that train of thought, is that, we saw our Canadian government give $70 billion over to the banks. We see, I remember in 2009, they spent $27 billion on the war in Afghanistan. Well, I was shocked, but really surprised to hear that $13 billion, half of the war budget, could have given us, and I guess that's also half of the fighter jets that are being purchased currently, is that $13 billion could have been enough to provide free universal post-secondary education to every single Canadian student that wanted to go and fully upgrade our healthcare system. So there is money, right? And I think, Joel, just to go back a little bit, what you were getting at was that divide and rule mentality. Why isn't, when we see the attacks on workers, why is it the initial response is, oh, well, I don't have it, so nobody should have it? Well, I think that's the mainstream media that's been shoving this down our throats since we were small. You know what I mean? It's these lies and total falsifications of what the system really is. And I think it's really important, as was said earlier, it's not about a race to the bottom. And with the Toronto Young New Democrats, I have two great examples to give you. When the TTC workers, when it was coming up to take away their right to strike, and also this was also when they were increasing the fares, we actually put together a flyer talking about preserving good jobs and also talking about free public transit. Hell, we dared to say free public transit. It does exist in some European cities. Why not? We do have money on a federal level. Why not invest it in our municipalities? Why not invest in our public goods? And as youth, we need to start raising these ideas. We need to stop being told by everybody that this is impossible. And I even hear this from some folks in the labor movement and the NDP. We need to start really recreating that vision because, trust me, I'm sure during Tommy Douglas's day, we were told that universal healthcare was impossible. Well, now we have it. We're losing it, and we need to fight to preserve it and improve it. But we need to start raising those demands. And actually, I was very impressed to see the public's response. It was sort of mixed, but a lot of youth, I feel like my parents' generation, they grew up in the capitalist boom. They grew up where, my dad had grade 10 education and could still be a pilot and, they could still have a house. Well, now our generation knows that reality is completely different. We are the first generation to have a lower standard of living than our parents. And and everything that our grandparents and our great-grandparents fought for is being lost. So I feel like there's a change in tide of our consciousness that's occurring. And I think that these classic divided rule, it's good that TTC workers got a hit because I don't have it. I don't feel like the youth are saying that. I feel like the youth are saying, I don't have anything after I graduate school. We need to have something. And so I feel that they're very linked to it. And another example I can give is during the CUPE strike, the Toronto Young Democrats organized youth delegations to go and show support to the striking workers down at the Central Sorting House on Eastern Avenue. And a lot of these youth, some of them are just students, some are workers, a lot of them ununionized, some are unionized, some have been homeless in their life. All walks of life are coming to the picket lines, and they're having discussions with workers. And the workers were telling them, we're fighting for the next generation. We're fighting against this two-tier system that's going to, completely decimate our pensions, our wages, our health and safety regulations, all of that. And a lot of these young folks, they knew unions were good, but they weren't quite sure why. After those visits, they were fully convinced. And, and I think it's really important that through our organizations that we provide those opportunities. And I'm really proud of the TYND's work in linking youth with the labor movement. But I also feel like we need to do more of that work on a much more mass scale. And because it is very scary. And I know that they say a lot of young people don't think about having pensions, but a lot of our jobs don't even give it to us. And so we need to educate ourselves more on this. And we also need, like I said, a big fight back to be able to not only fight to keep what we have, but to massively improve it.
And I'm going to take a really short break for one more song here by the Cowboy Junkies, and we're going to come back with just 2 questions as we wrap it up. But I couldn't agree more with what's being said. And the other thing I'd like to point out, and particularly we were talking about Toronto here, and the austerity that's coming. And you'll hear again and again, we can't afford it. We just can't afford what we have in Toronto. A lot of people don't realize that our property taxes, just to talk about what we collectively put in, our property taxes in Toronto are among the very lowest in the GTA. We pay less than people in Mississauga. We pay less than people in King City. And so I think as we organize around, well, do we really have to close this library or not? And the things Jennie was talking about is particularly services that impact women, which we've been talking about today, but young people. Let's ask, well, what are we collectively putting in? Or maybe we're not putting in enough collectively to build the kind of society we want. And we're gonna be back very shortly here, and we've got 2 more questions as we wrap it up before we're done.